We're going to be talking about, I'm from just south of Boston. You'll figure that out for yourselves pretty quickly. And the first thing I'm going to mention to open it up, we're going to wing it. We're improvising to a great degree. We're going to try to do the best we can. We could go on for hours, and at the same time, we're scattershot what we're going to do. But I spoke for a good hour and a half in front of 200 enthusiastic, attentive people in New Orleans in 2015. And the minute I said New Orleans, 70 of them yelled, "Nolans! Nolans!" And I went, "Okay." And he said, "Olney," which is how I pronounce it. But if David Denton was here, he'd go, "Alney, Alney." So there, wanted to check him. When I spoke several times in Alney, and David picked me up at the airport in the nighttime, and he's driving, it's an interesting rural area, and there were deers eating grass next to wooden fences, and I swear I'm riding by, and this creature was crawling along the side of the road, and I looked at David, I said, "Is that an aardvark? What the hell is that thing?" And I'm always making aardvark jokes with him. At any rate, let me begin by talking about 2015. I did a good hour and a half, and it was I taught for 40 years. From a personal point of view, it was one of my more satisfying speeches because they were really into everything I was doing. And I was at Clay Shaw's trial for 1 week, February school vacation. I was a first-year high school English teacher, and it was February school vacation. And my next-door neighbor, Billy Hennessy, I haven't seen for 40 years, his brother was an official in the NSA. And when he'd come for Thanksgiving dinner, I'm feeding Billy all this Kennedy assassination stuff. And Billy go, "What about this? What about that?" And at Thanksgiving dinner, he's going, "No comment." No comment. So when the Shaw trial was going on, I said, "Billy, let's go drive." And I had a shitmobile with no snow tires. And they said, "What the hell? Let's go." So we just took some money and drove there. And I had to drive through the blizzard of '69, which was the worst one until the blizzard of '78. I'm driving behind these big mother 18-wheelers to stay in the ruts. And I had to drive back through the sucker to get back home. And then all of a sudden when you get to Louisiana, it's like 85. It was like amazing how it changed. At any rate, I got it, and I told the whole story of my exploits. I'll go into some of it, depending upon how this works out. But I gave my speech, and the first thing I talked about, which I do have to do, is when I got in there, it was the first day I was there, and we got in late, and a lot of the press had left the courtroom where the Shaw trial was going on, so there were empty seats. And there was a woman standing in the foyer to the courtroom named Nina Sulzer, and it was her job to decide who gets in and who doesn't. And she was a very nice lady. And I said, I just drove 1,300 miles to get here through the snow. Can I get in there? And she said, "Well, today you can because it's fairly empty. People have left." So I got in, I got frisked and all that, and I sat right behind Clay Shaw. And every day I tried to sit behind him, and I'd talk to him, and I'd ask him questions, and he was very, very cool, which really impressed me, even when it was in. But anyway, so I went through this whole thing, and I told a speech in 2015 in front of all these people, my whole exploits, and I'll go into some of it a little bit later. But get into it here. I finished, and I walked into the audience. And this little lady walked up to me, and she said, "I knew Nina Sulzer." And I should tell you this, Nina Sulzer was a friend of Clay Shaw's. Well, she shouldn't have that job. Talk about a conflict of interest. And to this day, I go, what the hell is Garrison allowing a friend of Clay Shaw's being the one who decides who gets in and who doesn't get in? That's a hernia. So, I told her that, and I came down, and this woman came up to me and said, "I knew Nina Sulzer." I said, "Oh, how's she doing?" "Oh, she died." "Oh," I said, "Oh, that's too bad." She said, "I married her husband." And I went, whoa. So that's how this began. And so we've been kind of together doing different things in terms of the case since 2015. And the thing is that she knew a lot of the characters down there because she lived down there. She knew them. See, I'm an outsider. You know, I learned by hook and crook through the years. But, you know, she really lived down there. And every once in a while, you know, I'll be talking to her, and then she'll throw something. Oh, by the way, and I go, you never told me that before. For God's sakes, that's important. So I'm sure there's like a whole book inside there that I don't even know about yet. Well, anyway, be that as it may, I guess you want to do your shtick about Mr. Oswald and
Sure.
maybe Mrs. Sulzer or Ms. Sulzer, and we'll go from there. So I'll turn it over to Victoria, Lovejoy, Hawes, Sulzer, and there's like 6 other names in there. She's married 3 times, 6 children, 17 grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren. Hey, she deserves some applause just for that. Especially 3 husbands.
That's, what do they call that, TMI, too much information?
You gotta
Oh,
talk into it.
okay. Raise your hand if you can't hear me. My voice is not very loud, even with the mic. Hold it this way,
Does this work with you?
like that?
If you want to hold it?
Is this better? Yes. Okay. First of all, I want to start out by thanking Ed Haslam, who is sitting right over there, for speaking with me and including my story in his book, Dr. Mary's Monkey. If you haven't read it, read it, buy it, read it. You may wish to read it several times. That's what it takes to you read something, and then all of a sudden you say, wait, and you back up and read a little more. So my story starts with me living in an apartment building in New Orleans on St. Charles Avenue, and it was called the Patio Apartments. I moved there with my little baby girl and my husband, I guess in early 1962. And during this time, we just lived there, and he worked for NASA. I'll get back to some of the, I walk all over the place with my story, but it was very strange. We moved to Dallas, then we moved to New Orleans. My husband got a job immediately with NASA. We moved into this Patio Apartments building, which was very difficult to get into in the first place. I mean, people just didn't rent in the Patio Apartments. It was a little 2-story apartment building, maybe with 16 apartments. I'm not even sure. But that, number one, is sort of odd in the whole story of where I am. It was very difficult to get residency there. And then to be in a prime spot was interesting. It was also interesting that my husband got a job with NASA immediately. And I have suspicions about him, which I will share later. One of my ex-husbands. But anyway, while living there, Lee Harvey Oswald one day came and knocked on my door. Now, the little apartments, you can't see what I'm drawing, but if the apartments are shaped like a U, the front of it is facing St. Charles Avenue. They're called the patio apartments because each little cubicle has a little enclosed patio. So the knock was on the door. And I opened it up, and there was a face there. And the face said, "Is this Juan Valdez's apartment?" Now, if you've read Dr. Mary's Monkey, you will know that Juan Valdez is a character in the book, a very interesting character in the book. And I said, "No, this is not his apartment. He's right next door." But in that moment of this face, I said to him, "I know you. I know you." And he said, "You're Lee Harvey Oswald." No, I think I said, "You're Lee Harvey." But anyway, he said, yeah. And he said, "I have a package for Juan. And if he's not there, can I leave it with you?" I said, "Sure, no problem." And he said, "Make sure you put it in the refrigerator." And I'm going to connect back to this in just a moment. I said, "Oh, okay, no problem." Now, Juan, nobody ever knew what Juan really did. what his line of work was. I thought he was an accountant. I thought he was an antique dealer. I knew that he grew orchids. So that all by itself, to put something in the refrigerator, I figured it was orchid flowerlings, whatever they are. So I accepted that, that particular situation. But that was it. We just said hello, and I know you, and no small talk. That was it. That's the end of the Lee Harvey Oswald story, which is really tiny. He also, in this apartment building, was Mary Sherman, Dr. Mary Sherman. If you read the book, you will also learn that she was murdered. This is still an unsolved murder in New Orleans. People have asked me several times, did I know her? No, I didn't know her. She was in the apartment, and I might say hello, good morning, whatever. She was murdered about, I'd say, 2 months after I moved out of the apartments. So I didn't, there was no real interest in Mary Sherman. Why would there be? There was no interest in Lee Harvey Oswald. Why would there be? Nothing had happened of note at that time. The interesting thing, there's two interesting things. After we moved, I got a phone call. Now we moved, and we had an unlisted number. And the person on the other end of the phone said, "Did you hear about Mary Sherman?" And I said, "No." And I said, "Well, she's been murdered." And the voice said, "Well, just be careful. Be careful what you say. Don't offer any information to anybody." I didn't have any information to offer. But I realized the voice was Juan Valdez. So that made me wonder, my whole life I've wondered, what was he? What was he really connected to? How did he get my number? Never heard from him again, never saw him again, and I never had any problems with anybody. But, that now is an indication that there was, in fact, something strange going on. I think that my husband was connected somehow with CIA, because he would get different jobs in different places that were questionable as a young wife and mother. I never did know where he was. I never did really know what he did. Never did really understand who his friends were. And that's just a whole nother boring story.
And that's the first husband, okay? Because we're going to
Yes.
talk about the third one, too.
I have to think about it. Yeah, he was my first husband, and he's gone now. But anyway, what am I leaving out? You tell me. I don't even know.
I think you're doing fine.
Oh, okay.
Did you
No.
want to talk about the mice possibility?
Oh, God, yes.
I did all right.
He's so good. While living in this apartment, there were efficiency apartments, and any of you that have lived in efficiency apartments know how really tiny they are. The little square apartments, you have a little living room area, your little eating areas here, kitchen, bedroom, bathroom. Each apartment's plumbing backed up to each other's plumbing. The walls were like paper thin. If somebody sneezed, you would say, "God bless you." Anyway, from Juan's apartment, very late at night, sometimes early morning, we would hear the toilet flushing. Again, if you've read the book, you might connect somewhere in there what's going on. And I had no idea, of course, anything until I read the book, which was 20, 30, 40 years later. Flushing, 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 over and over and over, a dozen times. Voices. We just figured, well, he's a party guy. I don't know, maybe they're shooting up drugs. I have no idea. I didn't care. But that's the story there. Many, many years later, thanks to Ed Haslam, the light bulb went off, and I learned about Dr. Mary Sherman. I learned about the monkey viruses. I learned about the mice tumours, et cetera, et cetera. The packages that came, that I put in my refrigerator, along with my food and baby formulas, was pulverized mice tumors with the monkey virus. And they were being flushed nightly, or maybe 3 or 4 times a week. That's what that was. So my question, has always been what you have to ask Ed Haslam about that. What kind of viruses were being flushed into the New Orleans drinking water or into the Mississippi River? And that's just my own personal thought on that. But anyway, that's what was going on there. I will fast forward to my third husband. Nina Sulzer was, in fact, the person, as Ed said, that let people in and out of this trial that was going on. Clay Shaw was not just an acquaintance, he was the godfather to one of my husband Jeff and Nina's children. From what I know, he was a very nice man. He was a gentleman. He was an artist. He was well-read, well-traveled. Unfortunately, for me and my purpose being here, I didn't know how important this trial was. I didn't know how important that relationship was that they had after my husband passed on. There were files and folders of many things. And there again, I didn't know how important it was. But there were even letters. My husband, I think, traveled with Clay Shaw to Mexico several times. I'll find little handwritten notes. What that has to do with anything, I don't know, except there is the thought that, Lee Harvey Oswald traveled to Mexico as well. I'll never know. I'll never know what that relationship was, except that they were really, really fine friends. I don't know. I'm drawing a total blank.
Okay, let me throw a couple of things in here while she's saying that. Now here comes the outsider. I'm 22 years old, just drove through the snowstorm, and I meet these two old ladies that have a car filled with Kennedy assassination books and magazines and newspapers. If I get a chance, I'll talk about one of them I found that was fascinating to me and is really important to the scheme of things. Mr. Shaw will find this of interest here. And not Clay Shaw, Gary Shaw. And they show me some things, and so anyway, I went into the foyer of the courthouse, and the two old ladies were saying, we don't understand this single bullet theory stuff. And I said, well, I said, let me explain it. So I took out my notebook, I still have it, and I started drawing. I said, the Zapruder film, before we found out it was doctored, the Zapruder film, there's 2.5 seconds, 1.8 seconds between Kennedy reacting to a wound and Connally reacting to a wound. And the fastest you can fire the rifle, they say Oswald owned, and I just wrote an article for Garrison Magazine for the next issue, and you should look into Garrison Magazine, that he didn't own the rifle, but that's another story for another time. But at any rate, I don't want to lose my train of thought. I'm sitting down and I'm saying, you see, I drew Kennedy, I drew Connally. I said, there's only 1.8 seconds between the two men reacting to a wound, and it takes over 2.3 seconds without even aiming the sucker to fire it twice. So you can't fire two separate shots and say one guy did it. The only way to believe one guy did it with that rifle is to have one bullet to go through two men. And so now we are into what Fred Newcomb was the first one to say it, and I've adopted it, the single bullshit theory. And in the early years, I spoke at Harvard in 1993, and I did an hour and a half showing 50 ways that is garbage. And then I'm drawing it and explaining it, and the next thing you know, there's 10 people, 15 people, 40 people, maybe 50 people surrounded me, and I'm on my knee. And all of a sudden, there's like somebody's kind of pushing their way through. And I'm looking down, and there are two huge shoes standing there. And I look up, and it's Garrison. I said, hi. He said, keep going, son, you're doing fine. So I finished my little spiel, and they all dissipated. But this is the part, just like that little Juan Valdez conversation about, keep your mouth shut, be careful. I'm finished, I'm 22. I'm pretty well versed for a 22-year-old 6 years after the murder of President Kennedy. But what I know you can put in a thimble, some of you remember what a thimble was. See, I'm showing how old I am. But at any rate, this guy walks up to me and he said, you're young, but you're going to write a book about this someday. and I want to get it. Can I have your name and address? And I was so proud of myself. Look at that. And I, like an idiot, I gave him my name and address, and I figured that was my first spook. I never heard from him. That's it, you know? I figured that was it, and it kind of fits in. So I get into the courtroom. Nina Sulzer lets me in. I go in, and I sit right behind Clay Shaw. Now, her third husband is one of Clay Shaw's best friends, and she told me he used to sit right behind Clay Shaw every day, for every day of the trial. So the irony of it is, I'm probably sitting right next to her future husband, and we don't even know each other. And here I am, sitting next to his wife, whatever it is, 40 years later. Can't make this crap up, you know. And I'll tell one other quick thing, and then we'll move on here, because I want to go back to Mary Sherman and Nina. At any rate, I only had the week. I had to get back to school, and I figured I had to leave Friday to make sure I could get home. And I'll tell this now, I had to go through the blizzard, and I got through it, and when I got to South Carolina, I made a phone call to the weather station saying, you know, what's the story here? And he said, where are you? I said, South Carolina. What route? And I told him, he said, son, you get in your car and you go all the way to Boston, because if you stop for an hour, you won't see Boston for 2 weeks. I drove 26 hours, but I was 22. And about an hour after I got home, here it came, boom, you know. In fact, I should mention on the way down with Billy, we stopped it was a Carolina when I was north to south, and we stopped at a diner to get some food. This is 1969. Then we parked the car and get inside, and the waitress just kept going past us. Black guy came in, sat down, got waited on. And I'm like, what the hell is this? And I turned around and looked out the window, and the Massachusetts license plate was right there. And I looked at him, I said, look. He went, son of a bitch. They fed the black guy, but they're not going to feed the Yankees. And we had to get up and leave. Okay? I was at the back of the bus for the first time in my life. You know? At any rate, I said to Nina, I said, I got to get in here. I know tomorrow it's going to be filled with press from all over the world. How do I get in here? She said, the judge's brother is a clerk. He's in that room over there. Maybe he can help you. So I would knock on the door. This guy comes up, looks exactly like the judge. I mean, they were clones. They might have been twins, might have been, there's no question it was the same mother, you know what I mean? And he said, I can't help you. He said, see that door over there? I said, yeah. He said, the judge is going to come out of there. You got to ask the judge. I said, okay. So I'm waiting an hour and a half, and out comes the judge. Now I'm going to read something to you about this judge that's written by a guy that really trashes the judge, Garrison, and everybody connected to this case. Don't kill the messenger if you're a Garrison lover. I didn't write it, okay? At any rate, the judge comes out. Hey, baby. Yabba dabba doo, da da dee da da da. Oh, he was a hellraiser. You could just tell, you know, and he sure was, okay, because he eventually gets disbarred. At any rate, and I come up to him, I said, sir, I drove from Boston, Massachusetts. I went, you know, through a snowstorm with no snow tires to get here. I've been at this for 6 years. I got to get in there. So he starts asking me questions as we're walking to this elevator. And he asked me all these technical questions about the case that we knew at that time. And I knew the answers. And he looked at me and said, you know your stuff, don't you, boy? I said, yes, sir. And he pulled out a card and wrote my name on it. He said, you're in, kid. So that was it every morning. Show my card, get frisked, sit down next to Clay Shaw. All right. He said, I want to see you, when are you leaving? Friday. I want to see you Friday. He calls me on Friday. Everyone has left. And the bailiff is there. And I wait for the bailiff. He said, what? And I said, the judge wants to see me. And he's looking like, what the hell for? You're 22, you know. So he goes in this little alcove thing, and he comes back out, and he goes, and I'm walking up, and the only one left in the courtroom was Clay Shaw and his lawyers. And they're looking at me like, who the hell was that kid? And it was it's just a gut feeling like they've got concern. I've been talking to that kid. Who the hell is he? And it always unnerved me. Now I'm very ambivalent about Shaw and whether he's really important to this thing, because at best, even if he's guilty as hell, It's middle management territory. Mr. Shaw and I can talk about the Texas folks. They're a hell of a lot more important and powerful than a Clay Shaw. Be that as it may. I go in, and he comes in, and he says, that was Dr. John Nichols, a forensic pathologist, who says that the backward movement of President Kennedy's Zapruder film means the shot came from the right front. And he's a forensic pathologist. And I knew right then, what he was saying was, I believe in a conspiracy to kill President Kennedy. If I had gone out on the front steps of that courthouse and told the press that was out there that, there would have been a mistrial. I could have ended the whole damn thing. Never even dawned on me. Didn't even think of it. But I was fascinated. I mean, imagine the judge in that case, which was really the trial of the century, not O.J. You know, think about it. It was a domestic murder. This is a little bit more important. You know, and it's amazing. And he let me see all the exhibits. I saw 8x10 glossy blow-ups of the Zapruder film. I saw where Clay Shaw was supposed to have signed Clay Bertrand and the VIP booklet. And I mean, wow, it was my brush with history. And, you know, and it was wonderful. And who knew that this is 2019? Who the hell knew 50 years later I'd be talking to it in front of 200 people? I didn't think so. When I got home through the snowstorm, the next morning was shoveling snow. My mother came out, maybe the next day or something, and she said, they just found Clay Shaw not guilty. And I sat in the snow and cried. Not so much of a Clay Shaw, but I figured, this is it. They're never going to talk about this again. It's over. And then Nixon came along, and Watergate. And all of a sudden, the minds of the American people changed. Oh, gosh, this stuff can really go on. And if it happened there, the teachers that used to backstab me in school and mock me, all of a sudden were coming up to me and apologizing. Richard Nixon gave me credibility. Okay? You know? And I should mention, this lady in orange over here, Cheryl, she's a former student of mine from 1974. I taught her son and her daughter. She's been with me all these years, and she flew from Australia to be here. Okay? I must have done something right. And then one more thing, and then we'll go into this, and we'll see how we can pull her in. I know she wants me to do most of the talking anyway. I then boldly walked into Garrison's office and said, I want to talk to Jim Garrison. Who are you? Nobody. And he said, well, he's not here right now, but the Assistant District Attorney, James Alcock, is here. And he came over and talked to me. And I'm asking him questions. I don't remember any of it except for one thing. I said, in the Playboy interview of '67, Garrison had said, we believe we know the identity of the second Oswald, the imposter, running around doing all kinds of things incriminating Oswald. And I said, so you guys know the identity of the second Oswald, huh? He said, we don't know the identity of second Oswald. And, you know, I don't think Jim Garrison ever said that. Well, I knew he had. And again, if I went out in the front steps, Gary, oh my God, can you imagine the press? The head doesn't know what the tail knows? Never dawned on me to say anything like that. So anyway, now, my focus has always been the Texas axis of this. The oil men, Lyndon Johnson and all of his cronies, Hoover, James Riley in the Secret Service. That's why I feel simpatico with Palomara. Those of you who were here saw me interact with him yesterday. And somebody on the other end of the spectrum, the CIA did it. The CIA did it. The CIA did it, which is a predominant feature of the other conference. I don't want to generalize all of them, but you know, it's the CIA. And I'm going to talk about the Men Who Killed Kennedy series at 2 o'clock this afternoon. I've got 4 hours of material and I've got 50 minutes. And I'll just do the best I can. But the opening statement in The Guilty Men, Part 9, I say you can't kill the president unless the next president and the head of the FBI and the head of the Secret Service are in on the cover-up, okay? And so I'm not talking, I'm not exonerating. And a year ago, not this summer, but the summer before, Richard Bartholomew put a book out called The Deep State in the Heart of Texas, and I wrote the 10-page foreword. And in kind of sticking it to some of these people who are playing the CIA did it, which was Garrison's focus ultimately, the CIA. And I wrote about 25 conspiratorial facts, and in every paragraph I say, the CIA did not this, did not do this, the CIA did not do that, The CIA did not, I'm not exonerating him, but, I'm looking at Texas, I'm looking at Secret Service, I'm looking at FBI, and they're not looking at the whole picture by just focusing on that limited hangout, that kind of a thing. At any rate, one of the primary Garrison is Kevin Costner, okay? And he's not Kevin Costner, all right? Is Jim DiEugenio. And he kind of ignores the Texas end of things. I think he'd just assumed Mr. Shaw and I would just go away. But at any rate, he wrote something very interesting in his book, and he's talking about Nina Sulzer. And I'm just going to do a quick view of this. She was a NOLA person, prison worker, who knew Clay Shaw via her husband, Jeff Sulzer, who was Shaw's friend. Vernon Bundy, a drug addict, allegedly saw Shaw with Oswald, who inadvertently dropped leaflets about Cuba. Convicts Miguel Torres and John Cancler on television report claimed Bundy was lying, but refused to repeat the allegations before a NOLA grand jury and was cited for contempt. Nina allegedly talked to Bundy in prison and told him he was riding the wrong horse on a losing team. Nina gave Bundy anti-Garrison articles to read, some by Hugh Ainsworth, who was a major creep in this case in terms of pushing the lone nut scenario. She told him that trouble would be awaiting him on the outside, and she told someone was going to kill him. So what he's saying is that Nina Sulzer not only was a friend of Clay Shaw's, but he's trying to undermine the whole Garrison case of that. Garrison allegedly placed a tail on Nina, and she visited a residence where Shaw was staying, and she visited him for 3 hours. Now, my first concern, as a personal one, it's just speculation. I don't know any more than anybody else on this. But again, I bring back the point is, then why did Garrison allow her to be the person at the front of the foyer letting who gets in? And the other thing is, in his footnote, DiEugenio gets this information from a memo written by Bill Boxley. Well, Bill Boxley had a CIA background, and he's involved in a lot of stuff, but Boxley is a very questionable source, and I believe he was one of them. And so I don't think you can trust what Bill Boxley says to make these allegations. I'm not saying they're not true, but credibility factors in play with all of this. And I should mention this, I'll try to do this, and this will help me, I won't have to talk about it today. In part 7 of the Men Who Killed Kennedy series, The Smoking Guns, at the end, there's a whole thing about a man named John Liggett. He was a professional embalmer, considered one of the best. He put Jane Mansfield's head back on her body. He's supposed to be, really fantastic with that business. And his wife and his stepdaughter testify in The Smoking Guns that when Kennedy is killed, he gets a call to go to Parkland Hospital, and he goes there. He said, I got a lot of work to do. I won't be home. She didn't hear from him for 24 hours. If you are not familiar with The Smoking Guns, The Love Affair, or The Guilty Men, he was talking about it. See me later if that's something that you're interested in. And then you can see it all for yourselves. At any rate, the allegation is that Liggett is screwing around with bodies. Some speculate that he is screwing around with Kennedy's body. When Kennedy is in Texas, the doctors say this is an entrance wound about the size of a piece of chalk, and the back of his head is missing. By the time he reaches Washington, the Bethesda naval technicians and doctors who did the autopsy, this is about 3 inches long with widely gaping irregular edges, and the hole is over here. And then the autopsy photos that you can see in published books, this is all blown out, but the back of the head is fine. My best friend, Rick Russo, who knows as much about the Kennedy case medically as anyone else on the planet, brought all those Bethesda naval technicians together in 1992, and it's on film, I've seen it, and every one of them are looking at the pictures going, these are bullshit, the back of his head was gone. So the photos are doctored, they're faked. So you got all this going on. So the question is, and this part is theory, the suspicion is that maybe there was another body that Liggett is screwing around with, and then they took pictures of that, and those, it's not Kennedy's pictures or a composite of them. It's all speculation and theory. I don't know who's right, who's not, but something's very wrong, because what they're saying in Texas is not what they're saying in Bethesda. And David Lifton's written about it, and Will Law's written about it, and James Jenkins has written about it, and good luck. You know, this is a swamp. You need 4 lifetimes, and that might not be enough to figure out every aspect of this case. At any rate, not only was John Liggett involved in all that stuff, but he was a serial killer. He was killing people, and his prime modus operandi was, I believe I read, he used to shove phones up their asses, and the big thing was he lit them all on fire. He lit them all on fire in their beds. And there are a number of them that he suspected of doing. Now, he finally got caught because he was with a woman named Dorothy Peck. He beat the crap out of her, threw her on the bed. I don't know if he shoved the phone up her ass or not, but he lit her on fire. And she survived and you know, named him. And they caught him and arrested him, and he was arrested. And then the cops down there started saying, Jesus, this is the same kind of thing that this woman happened to this woman and this woman and this guy and that. And the speculation is that every once in a while he'd get drunk and say a little too much in the bar, and people would hear it, and then he had to go kill him because they knew too much. So at any rate, that's all going on. Now you have to understand one other thing. Dorothy Peck's husband was J. Burt Peck, okay? He was Lyndon Johnson's cousin. And I showed her a picture of J. Burt Peck today. And you can't tell him different from Lyndon Johnson. He's a clone of him. So the allegation that Lyndon Johnson is at the party of the Murchison's home the night before, and people, oh no, he was at the hotel in Houston, people saw him. Well, theory, maybe it's the cousin here, J. Burt Peck. Well, anyway, J. Burt Peck was shot in the head. Supposed to be a suicide. The wife said she heard a shot and ran in and he was dead, so maybe he committed suicide. There are all kinds of people who think he was murdered, but it is a convenient death. He was in the movie The Wrecking Crew with Elkie Summer and Dean Martin, and if you go and buy that now, the scenes with him in it twice, they've been removed. And of course the speculation is, well, who would be in a position to make sure that nobody ever sees that? He went on Johnny Carson. Maybe he's becoming a little too, some people might go, whoa. Who knows? The point is, the scenes are taken out. So who would be in a position to maybe get rid of him, theoretically? Well, the president in motion pictures of America is Jack Valenti. And let me tell you, Jack Valenti conspired to kill President Kennedy. He's the first cog in getting Kennedy to Texas. So it's all a jumble of what to believe, what not to believe, and speculation and theory in that. But boy, it's really uncomfortable in terms of those kinds of things. So the point is, he's burning people up, all right? And it was last week, I started thinking, how did Mary Sherman die? She was burned up. Now maybe there's more to it. And I said, Jesus, do you think Liggett might have been involved in the murder of Mary Sherman? Just a thought. And then Roscoe White is burned up. And even, I guess he even said, Reverend Jack Shaw, that he thought it might have been set up. I don't know. I know John Liggett used to play poker with Roscoe White. He knew him. I know that John Liggett used to play cards with Charles Harrelson, the mafia hitman. I corresponded with Charles Harrelson, his cellmate, and his last wife. Is he the tramp? Well, that's still speculation. I'm responsible for Charles Harrelson being interviewed on the Men Who Killed Kennedy series, okay? It's wild stuff. I have no idea if any of what I just said has any validity or not, but boy, it's intriguing as hell.
And are you aware that Liggett is about 50 feet buried at Westland Cemetery, about 50 feet from Roscoe's grave?
Well, I think I knew that, but it was Jay Harrison, the cop, who used to send me these gravestones, and everybody knew everybody's all buried near each other. Yeah. All kinds of suspects, high and low. They're all on the same, because he was a genealogist. And then you go, pardon my friend, Jesus. Yeah, that kind of thing. At any rate, I thought I would throw that out, especially where, she knew him. And he says we have less than 10 minutes. I don't know, do you have something else you want to throw out there about the Nina prison thing?
Yeah, just a little bit. Not only is Nina Sulzer, involved in the court scene, the Clay Shaw trial, but I learned, at least I think I do, everything that I'm telling you is not factual. I don't have proof. It's only that I have heard information or I have seen a little piece of paper, in my husband's files. What I did know, that Nina was involved in the prison system in New Orleans, Louisiana. She was supposedly an advocate for prisoners. Her job, from what I understand, was to make prison life more, I don't want to say comfortable, but meaningful in that prisoners were not mistreated. So I figured, well, that's a nice thing. They're getting education. They're making sure that they have their human rights addressed. And then later on, I learned that Nina Sulzer was part of a program to have prisoners on death row create a meaningful part in their lives by allowing for medical experimentation. And again, much later, after my own reading and some information from Ed Haslam, I learned that she was in fact taking prisoners to possibly be tested by a bioweapon or a virus. So, and here again, I have no proof. It's just hearsay. And my husband spoke about it only once, that's one of the things she was doing. And, was this a service to our country? I don't know. She definitely led two lives. She was a mother and a wife and a social, advocate for correctness within, our prison system. But then there was this other part, and I guess you have to make up, or I would in my own mind, was that a good thing? Was it a cruel thing? Was it meaningful? Does it have anything to do with anything that I have seen? New Orleans is a strange place, and one time I had a guest in the audience and said, well, all cities are like that. All cities are like that. Everybody knows everybody. And that could be true. But I think in New Orleans in particular, it's more profound. If you hear things and you know things because of the news and the media, but you also live next door to these people. You also know their cousin or their cousin's mother. So anything that is profoundly deviant, you know about. And not only do you know about it, you know the people involved. I knew Garrison. I knew Judge Haggerty. I mean, I sat down and had drinks and cocktails in lounges with Haggerty. And he was a lecher. He was an absolute lecher. He was crazy. And many other people. And I don't know how many cities are like that a normal young woman can, just living life, knows 10 or 15 deviant people, big mafia people, crooked judges, strange district attorneys. I mean, I don't know.
And let me add another thing that connects to her story. I talk about John Liggett playing poker parties, having poker parties with Charlie Harrelson and Roscoe White. But in the Smoking Guns, Liggett's wife and his stepdaughter said David Ferry used to visit him. So now you got the guy that's involved in your story with Nina Sulzer and all that, and Haslam, and now he's connected to Liggett. Okay, where there's smoke, there's not necessarily fire, but in most fires, people die of smoke inhalation. So maybe you got to pay attention to all this kind of stuff. And you also have to keep in mind, I have a list here of why Garrison never succeeded. He underestimated his enemies. He was unable to extradite key individuals. He possessed limited resources. He was indifferent to money. A man named Lou Wolfson, who was financially involved with Abe Fortas, who was one of Johnson's lawyers and got booted off the Supreme Court. Lou Wolfson was convicted of crimes. One of his character witnesses is Joe DiMaggio. Joe DiMaggio was involved in this Kennedy assassination. I can't talk about it because the people who gave me the information will be murdered tomorrow. But he's definitely involved. and Garrison thought he was wonderful. So, that questions his judgment and so forth. He never confronted the mafia controversy. The people over there will say, oh, no, he didn't have anything to do with it. There are documented things about his links to the mob. And all you got to do is read his own words. There was no organized crime in New Orleans. Are you shitting me? Are you kidding? Carlos Marcello right there. Harold Weisberg, David Scheim, Sylvia Ma, Robert Sam Anson, John Davis, David Lifton to some degree, Patricia Lambert, and Jones Harris. All major researchers through the years have all either called Garrison a fraud or at least seriously questioned his methods and so forth. Perry Raymond Russo is the linchpin of all this, and he was a weird character, and they used sodium pentothal and hypnosis on him. Boy, there are serious questions here about a lot of the things that went on. When people ask me, and there are a lot of great things that Garrison did. So, I'm ambivalent. For all these years, I say, what do you think? I'm ambivalent. Garrison wrote to me once, a handwritten note he sent to me, because I was saying Secret Service and Texas stuff. And he wrote, December 30th, 1985, the CIA is really the only clandestine arm with the capability for murder, or what might be called the Cold War machine, or forces for the continuation of empire, or whatever. In essence, as I said back in 1970 in A Heritage of Stone, Dealey Plaza represented the takeover from civilian authority by military authority. Thus, your essential thesis is correct. However, as Hitler learned back in World War II, you can't fight on more than one front. So I have concentrated on the clandestine apparatus, which set up the scapegoat and accomplished the killing. Besides, if I approach it with a wider attack, it would be incomprehensible to too many people. Regards, Jim Garrison. He wrote that to me personally. But when he ignores the whole mob thing, that's disturbing. And there are people who allege that, who have told me that, he was in Marcello's pocket. Even Judith was told by one of her sources that he was sleeping with a Marcello woman. I can go on forever here, but I think we'll be glad to answer any questions. And if you're interested in 7, 8, and 9, which have been banned, see me. There is a book I recommend. The Garrison people will not like this. It's called Mr. New Orleans by Frenchy Brulette. He was a 5-decade pimp for Marcello, an iconic figure down there. And he wrote his memoirs in 2013, and his clients were Shaw, Ferry, Garrison, Haggerty. And he considers Garrison a pedophile. In fact, you wouldn't believe the quotes that are in here. Don't kill the messenger. He wrote the book in 2013. He was murdered in 2015. And he had great success for 50 years. Frenchy Brulette. And his ghostwriter was Matthew Randazzo. Whether you believe the book or not is up to you, but it is a well-written book. Randazzo is a great writer. In fact, he just wrote another book on the mob that just came out. Mr. New Orleans. But the Garrison supporters will not be happy with it. And, I don't know Frenchy, so I have no fight in the dark. But boy, it sounds realistic. We thank you very much.
Ed Haslam, Victoria Powell Sulzer.